Humans have survived wars, plagues, and disasters. Sometimes they couldn't survive themselves.
I told the Baron
Number
his
1.
new tunic made
The
him
king
look
who
rather
literally laughed
rotund.
himself to death.
He said it was Italian
In the early
silk.
15th century,
I said,
King
"No,
Martin of
sir,
Aragon
that is
reportedly
clearly a
died after an
tapestry of
extraordinary
girth."
combination of indigestion and uncontrollable laughter. According to the best-known historical account, the aging king had eaten a heavy meal of goose and was already feeling miserable when his court jester entered the room. Martin asked where he had been, and the fool answered with a ridiculous story about seeing a deer hanging by its tail from a vineyard, as if it had been punished for stealing grapes. The absurd image sent the king into a fit of laughter he simply could not stop. Medieval chroniclers claim the prolonged laughing, combined with his poor physical condition, triggered his collapse. Modern historians debate the exact medical cause, but the story survived because it perfectly captures history's strange sense of humor. Imagine ruling a kingdom for decades, surviving political intrigue and wars, only to have your final enemy be an excellent punchline. Number 2. The astronomer who lost his nose, then lost his life. Tycho Brahe was one of history's greatest astronomers, but his death became almost as famous as his discoveries. Decades before his final illness, Brahe had already lost part of his nose in a sword duel over a mathematical argument, replacing it with a metal prosthetic. Yet that wasn't the bizarre ending people remember.
How dare you bring
In
this up
1601, while
now?
attending an elaborate royal banquet in Prague, court etiquette discouraged
The
guests from
truth
leaving the
must
table
be
before the host.
heard, my lord.
Brahe reportedly refused to excuse himself despite desperately needing to use the restroom. Hours later, he returned home in severe pain. For centuries, people believed his bladder had ruptured from holding his urine too long, leading to a fatal infection days later. Modern medical research suggests kidney disease or another urinary complication may have played a larger role, but the central lesson remains unforgettable. One of Europe's brightest scientific minds may have died because royal manners mattered more than common sense. Number 3. The lawyer who
this
defended
is
himself into an
justice,
early grave.
Then let the court
Clement
condemn
Vallandigham was a
me
brilliant
now.
American lawyer and former congressman
But these
whose courtroom
guns
demonstration
tell a
became one of
different
history's most
story.
astonishing legal disasters. In 1871, he defended a man accused of murder by arguing that the victim had accidentally shot himself while drawing his pistol. To convince the jury, Vallandigham
been
recreated
shot.
the supposed
Get a
struggle
doctor,
using a pistol he
quickly.
believed was unloaded.
Stay
As he
with us,
dramatically
please stay
demonstrated the
with us.
movement, the weapon discharged directly into his abdomen. The courtroom
This
instantly transformed
is
from a
the
murder trial
weapon
into a
that
genuine
killed him.
medical emergency.
Look
Despite receiving
closely at
treatment,
the
Vallandigham died the
evidence
following
before
day
you
from his injuries.
condemn an innocent
Ironically, his
man.
dramatic demonstration helped persuade
He
the jury that his
lunged at
client's
me
version
like
of events was
this.
entirely plausible, leading to an acquittal. Few legal
I had
arguments
no
have ever been so
choice but to
persuasive
fire.
or so catastrophically expensive. History rarely hands out awards for commitment to a case, but Vallandigham unquestionably gave the most unforgettable demonstration a courtroom has ever witnessed. Number 4. The emperor who challenged a volcano and lost Roman Emperor Titus had barely settled into his reign when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum beneath volcanic ash. Titus responded with remarkable speed, sending money, soldiers, and relief efforts to the devastated region. Ancient writers praised him for personally overseeing aid to survivors, earning him a reputation as one of Rome's most compassionate rulers. Yet only 2 years later, after touring disaster-stricken areas and dealing with another devastating fire and plague in Rome, Titus suddenly died at just 41 years old. Ancient rumors ranged from fever to poisoning by his brother Domitian, although no evidence has ever confirmed murder. His death dramatically altered Roman history, paving the way for Domitian's controversial reign. One emperor spent his final years fighting nature's worst disasters, only to become another tragedy that reshaped the future of the Roman Empire. Number 5. The explorer who was killed by the people he tried to impress. Ferdinand Magellan achieved what few sailors even imagined possible by leading the expedition that would complete the first circumnavigation of the globe. Ironically, he never lived to finish the journey himself. In 1521, after reaching the Philippine Islands, Magellan became involved in a local political conflict that had little to do with exploration. Confident that European weapons and armor guaranteed victory, he agreed to help one island chief defeat another. During the Battle of Mactan, his assumptions collapsed. Forced to fight in shallow water where ships could not support him, Magellan and his small force were surrounded by hundreds of determined warriors led by Lapu-Lapu. Spears, arrows, and blades overwhelmed the famous navigator despite his superior equipment. His death instantly transformed a triumphant voyage into a desperate struggle for survival, while proving that local knowledge often defeats even history's greatest adventurers. Number 6. The engineer who became the first victim of his own invention. William Bullock revolutionized the newspaper industry during the 19th century by inventing one of the fastest rotary printing presses ever built. His machine dramatically increased printing speed, helping newspapers become cheaper and more widely available across America. Tragically, Bullock died because he refused to let anyone else repair his own invention. In 1867, while installing a new press in Philadelphia, his foot became trapped inside the massive machinery as he attempted to adjust a belt by hand. The crushing injury shattered his leg beyond repair. Infection quickly followed, forcing doctors to amputate the damaged limb in an era when surgery remained incredibly dangerous. Bullock died from complications shortly afterward. His invention continued transforming publishing for decades, but its creator never witnessed its full impact. Few inventors have paid such a painful price for personally trusting the machine that made them famous. Number 7. The composer who conducted his own final performance. Jean-Baptiste Lully dominated the musical world of King Louis XIV's France, composing magnificent works that defined the royal court. In 1687, while conducting a celebration honoring the king's recovery from illness, Lully used the traditional method of beating time with a heavy iron staff against the floor. During the performance, he accidentally struck his own foot with tremendous force. The wound seemed minor at first, but it soon became infected. Doctors urged immediate amputation to stop the infection from spreading, yet Lully refused because he feared losing the ability to dance, one of his greatest passions alongside music. Gangrene gradually consumed his leg before spreading throughout his body. Within weeks, the celebrated composer was dead. The man whose music filled Europe's grandest palaces ultimately became one of history's most tragic reminders that pride sometimes proves deadlier than the original injury. Number 8. The king who walked straight into an enemy trap. King Harold Godwinson began 1066 by winning one of England's greatest military victories, defeating a massive Viking invasion at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Instead of enjoying his triumph, he immediately faced another crisis. William, Duke of Normandy, had landed in southern England, forcing Harold and his exhausted army to march nearly 200 miles in remarkable time. On October 14th, at the Battle of Hastings, Harold's soldiers fought fiercely for hours from their defensive hilltop. According to medieval tradition, Harold was struck in or near the eye before Norman cavalry overwhelmed the English line, although historians still debate the exact details of his fatal wound. His death ended Anglo-Saxon rule almost instantly and changed English language, law, architecture, and culture forever. Few battlefield deaths have redirected the course of an entire nation's future so completely. Number 9. The general who was too valuable to stay alive. George Armstrong Custer had already become one of America's most recognizable military figures long before the Battle of the Little Bighorn. His bold cavalry charges during the Civil War turned him into a national celebrity, but fame also fueled dangerous overconfidence. In 1876, Custer divided his regiment into separate battalions while pursuing what he believed was a relatively small encampment of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Instead, he encountered one of the largest Native American forces ever assembled on the Great Plains. Outnumbered and cut off from reinforcements, Custer and every soldier under his immediate command were killed within a short time. His defeat shocked the United States, intensified the Great Sioux War, and permanently changed federal policy toward Native nations. One battlefield decision transformed Custer from a celebrated hero into one of history's most enduring cautionary tales about arrogance and flawed intelligence. Number 10. the president who ignored a simple warning. James A. Garfield served as President of the United States for only a few months before becoming the victim of one of American history's most tragic medical failures. In 1881, Charles Guiteau shot Garfield at a Washington railroad station. Remarkably, the wounds were not immediately fatal. Modern trauma specialists widely agree the president could likely have survived with proper treatment. Instead, physicians repeatedly inserted unsterilized fingers and metal instruments into the wounds while searching for the bullet, unknowingly introducing severe infections. At the time, germ theory was still controversial among many American doctors, despite growing scientific evidence supporting it. Garfield lingered for more than 2 months before dying from infection and complications. His death profoundly influenced public confidence in medicine, strengthened support for civil service reform, and highlighted the urgent need for modern surgical hygiene. Sometimes history changes because science arrives just a little too late. Number 11. The dancer who could not escape the Titanic. Wallace Hartley wasn't a politician, king, or military commander. He was the bandleader aboard RMS Titanic. When the great ship struck an iceberg in 1912, panic spread rapidly across the freezing decks. Rather than saving himself immediately, Hartley gathered his fellow musicians and continued performing to calm frightened passengers as lifeboats were launched. Survivors consistently recalled hearing music drifting across the chaos, helping maintain order during one of history's most famous maritime disasters. Hartley and the other musicians never left their posts. Every member of the orchestra perished as the ship disappeared beneath the Atlantic. Their courage became an enduring symbol of professionalism and sacrifice, inspiring countless books, films, and memorials. While historians still debate the final song they played, there is no debate about their impact. Sometimes the quietest acts of bravery echo longer than the loudest victories ever recorded. Number 12. The emperor who opened the gates to a new religion. Roman Emperor. Julian earned the nickname the Apostate because he attempted to restore traditional Roman paganism after Christianity had gained enormous influence throughout the empire. Unlike many rulers before him, Julian was highly educated, deeply philosophical, and determined to reverse what he viewed as Rome's cultural decline. In 363, he launched an ambitious military campaign deep into Persian territory. Initially successful, the campaign soon unraveled as supply lines stretched dangerously thin. During a chaotic skirmish, Julian rushed into battle without wearing his breastplate, reportedly eager to inspire his troops personally. A spear struck him in the abdomen, inflicting a fatal wound. His death ended the final serious attempt to revive Rome's ancient religions. Within years, Christianity's position became virtually unchallenged across the empire. One battlefield decision permanently altered the religious future of Europe and much of the Western world. Number 13. The Archduke whose wrong turn. Started a World War, few deaths have reshaped human history as dramatically as the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in 1914. Earlier that morning in Sarajevo, one assassin had already failed when a bomb missed the Archduke's car. Believing the danger had passed, Franz Ferdinand continued his official schedule before deciding to visit wounded officers at a local hospital. During the trip, his driver mistakenly turned onto the wrong street and stopped while attempting to reverse. By astonishing coincidence, the vehicle halted directly in front of Gavrilo Princip, another conspirator who moments earlier believed the mission had failed. Princip seized the unexpected opportunity and fired 2 fatal shots, killing both the Archduke and his wife Sophie. Within weeks, Europe's fragile alliance system collapsed into the First World War, a conflict that redrew borders, toppled empires, and transformed the 20th century forever. Number 14. The scientist who accidentally created a deadly standard. Marie Curie changed science forever through her pioneering research on radioactivity, becoming the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in different scientific fields. Yet the very discoveries that revolutionized medicine ultimately cost her life. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the dangers of radiation were poorly understood. Curie routinely carried radioactive samples in her pockets, stored glowing materials in desk drawers, and handled them with almost no protection because their long-term effects remained unknown. Years of constant exposure gradually damaged her bone marrow, leading to aplastic anemia. She died in 1934, but her notebooks, laboratory journals, and even personal belongings remain radioactive today and must still be handled with specialized protective equipment. Her sacrifice transformed scientific safety standards worldwide, ensuring future generations of researchers would understand that even history's greatest discoveries often come with invisible risks. Number 15. The president who refused to hide from danger. Abraham Lincoln knew he was living under constant threat throughout the American Civil War, yet he consistently resisted heavy security. Friends, advisors, and even members of his own cabinet urged him to take greater precautions, but Lincoln believed a president should remain accessible to ordinary citizens. On the evening of April 14, 1865, only days after General Robert E. Lee surrendered, Lincoln attended a performance at Ford's Theater in Washington. Actor and Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth entered the presidential box almost completely unchallenged and fired a single shot into Lincoln's head before escaping. The president died the following morning. His assassination transformed Reconstruction, altered the future of civil rights, and elevated Lincoln into an enduring American icon. The Civil War had finally ended, yet one gunshot changed the nation's political future almost as dramatically as the conflict itself. Number 16. The inventor who could not escape his own ambition. Henry Winstanley believed engineering could conquer even the most violent forces of nature. After surviving a dangerous voyage through the English Channel, he became determined to construct the world's first successful offshore lighthouse on the treacherous Eddystone Rocks. Many experts insisted the project was impossible because storms repeatedly destroyed anything built there. Winstanley ignored every warning, designing increasingly elaborate structures that impressed visitors and government officials alike. When the Great Storm of 1703 approached England, he reportedly declared that he wished to be inside the lighthouse to witness its strength firsthand. The storm proved stronger than anyone imagined. The entire structure collapsed into the sea, killing Winstanley and everyone sheltering inside. His tragic death inspired future engineers to develop stronger lighthouse designs, demonstrating that true progress often advances through the painful lessons left behind by fearless pioneers. Number 17. The Emperor, whose death unleashed an empire's collapse. Alexander the Great conquered an empire stretching from Greece to India before reaching his 33rd birthday, accomplishing what many rulers failed to achieve in entire lifetimes. Yet after years of relentless campaigning, his astonishing rise ended with a mystery historians still debate more than 2,000 years later. In 323 BC, while staying in Babylon, Alexander suddenly developed a severe fever after attending a banquet. Over several agonizing days, he gradually lost the ability to speak and command his army before finally dying. Scholars continue arguing whether malaria, typhoid fever, natural illness, excessive drinking, or poisoning played the decisive role. What remains undisputed is the impact of his death. Alexander left behind no clear adult heir, triggering decades of brutal wars among his generals. The greatest empire of the ancient world shattered almost overnight because its unstoppable leader never prepared for the one battle nobody wins. Number 18. The Pope who died before he could change the Church. When Pope John Paul I was elected in 1978, many Catholics believed a new era had begun. Known for his warmth, humility, and approachable personality, he quickly signaled that significant reforms might follow. Then, only 33 days after becoming pope, he was found dead in his bed at the Vatican. The official cause was a sudden heart attack, but the unexpected timing fueled decades of conspiracy theories involving secret societies, financial scandals, and political intrigue. Despite countless investigations and books, no credible evidence has ever supported those dramatic claims. Historians generally agree that natural causes remain the most likely explanation. Even so, his remarkably brief papacy permanently influenced the Catholic Church by opening conversations about modernization that continued under later popes. Sometimes history changes not because of what a leader accomplishes, but because of everything left unfinished. Number 19. The king whose death triggered the English Civil War. King Charles I firmly believed that monarchs ruled by divine right and answered only to God. That belief placed him on a collision course with Parliament, which increasingly demanded limits on royal authority. Years of political tension eventually erupted into the English Civil War, dividing families, cities, and the entire kingdom. After suffering military defeat, Charles was captured, tried for treason against his own people, and sentenced to death in an unprecedented legal proceeding. On January 30th, 1649, he calmly stepped onto the execution scaffold outside the banqueting house in London, insisting that he died a martyr for the crown. His beheading shocked Europe because no reigning English monarch had ever been publicly executed by his own subjects. The monarchy was abolished, England briefly became a republic, and constitutional government moved permanently toward limiting absolute royal power. Number 20. The aviator who proved the Atlantic could be crossed. Charles Lindbergh became one of America's greatest heroes after completing the first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean in 1927. Less remembered is the extraordinary sacrifice of another aviation pioneer, whose death transformed commercial flight safety. British airship engineer Captain Herbert Irwin commanded the R-101, Britain's ambitious attempt to dominate long-distance air travel using giant dirigibles. In 1930, the massive airship crashed in France during its maiden overseas voyage, killing Irwin and 47 others. The disaster instantly shattered public confidence in rigid airships and convinced governments that airplanes represented the future of international transportation. Funding for Britain's airship program disappeared almost overnight. While Lindbergh inspired aviation through success, Irwin changed aviation through tragedy. Sometimes a single catastrophic accident redirects technology more dramatically than decades of successful experiments ever could. Number 21. The revolutionary who became a symbol. Greater than himself. Ernesto Che Guevara helped Fidel Castro overthrow Cuba's government before attempting to spread revolution across other continents. Believing armed uprisings could ignite worldwide political change, Guevara secretly traveled to Bolivia in 1966 to organize guerrilla forces. Instead of finding widespread support, he encountered poor planning, limited local cooperation, and relentless pursuit by Bolivian troops assisted by American intelligence. Captured after a fierce firefight, Guevara spent one final night imprisoned in a small village schoolhouse before being executed the following day. His death achieved the exact opposite of what his enemies expected. Rather than ending his influence, the famous photograph of his body and the iconic portrait taken years earlier transformed Guevara into one of history's most recognizable revolutionary symbols. His execution reshaped Cold War politics, protest movements, and political imagery for generations across nearly every continent. Number 22. The pharaoh whose tomb created the world's most famous curse. When Howard Carter discovered the nearly untouched tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun in 1922, the archaeological world celebrated one of history's greatest discoveries. Only months later, the expedition's financial sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, died after developing a severe infection from a mosquito bite that became infected following a shaving cut. Newspapers immediately connected his death to mysterious warnings supposedly carved inside the tomb, creating the sensational legend of the Curse of the Pharaoh. Although scientists have repeatedly dismissed supernatural explanations, pointing instead to ordinary medical complications, the story permanently captured the public imagination. Countless books, films, documentaries, and novels followed, transforming archaeology into worldwide entertainment. Ironically, Tutankhamun himself had been a relatively minor ruler, but Carnarvon's untimely death turned the young pharaoh into perhaps the most famous Egyptian king in modern history through the unstoppable power of myth. Number 23. The judge whose death changed. America's Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia served nearly 3 decades on the United States Supreme Court, becoming one of the most influential constitutional thinkers in modern American history. In February 2016, while staying at a ranch in West Texas during a hunting trip, Scalia died unexpectedly in his sleep from natural causes. His sudden passing created far more than a vacancy on the nation's highest court. It immediately sparked one of the most consequential political battles in modern American history. The Senate declined to consider President Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, arguing that the upcoming presidential election should determine the appointment. That unprecedented decision ultimately allowed the next president to nominate Neil Gorsuch instead, shifting the court's ideological balance for years to come. Few natural deaths have altered the direction of American constitutional law as profoundly as Scalia's unexpected passing. Number 24. The Tsar, whose assassination erased an empire. Tsar Alexander II of Russia earned the nickname the Liberator after abolishing serfdom and introducing sweeping reforms across the Russian Empire. Yet those same reforms satisfied neither conservatives nor revolutionaries. On a cold afternoon in 1881, members of the revolutionary organization Narodnaya Volya launched a carefully planned assassination in St. Petersburg. The first bomb damaged the imperial carriage but failed to kill the emperor. Against the advice of his guards, Alexander stepped outside to inspect the wounded and speak with survivors. Moments later, a second assassin approached and detonated another bomb at close range, inflicting fatal injuries. His death instantly halted many planned reforms, as his successor embraced harsher repression instead. Historians have long argued that the assassination delayed Russia's political modernization, deepened revolutionary tensions, and helped set the stage for the upheavals that would eventually transform the 20th century. Number 25. The dictator whose death ended the Cold War's final divide. Nicolae Ceausescu ruled Romania with absolute authority for more than 2 decades, building one of Eastern Europe's most repressive communist regimes. By 1989, economic collapse, food shortages, and growing public anger had pushed the country toward open revolt. During a televised speech in Bucharest, Ceausescu expected another carefully controlled display of loyalty. Instead, the crowd began booing him live on national television, a moment that stunned both the dictator and millions watching at home. Within days, he and his wife Elena attempted to flee but were captured by the army. After a brief military trial, both were sentenced to death and executed on Christmas Day. Their dramatic downfall became one of the defining images of communism's collapse in Eastern Europe. Romania immediately abandoned decades of dictatorship, permanently reshaping the political map of post-Cold War Europe. Number 26. The spy whose assassination changed nuclear history. Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh spent years at the center of one of the world's most closely watched security disputes. Widely believed by Western intelligence agencies to play a leading role in Iran's nuclear research, he lived under extraordinary protection. In 2020, while traveling near Tehran, Fakhrizadeh was killed in a highly sophisticated attack that reportedly involved advanced remote-operated weaponry. Although responsibility was never officially acknowledged, the assassination intensified already dangerous tensions across the Middle East and triggered international concern about the future of nuclear diplomacy. The incident demonstrated how modern conflicts increasingly rely on intelligence operations rather than conventional armies. Governments worldwide reassess the security of scientists working on sensitive national projects, recognizing that laboratories had become strategic battlegrounds. Few targeted killings have illustrated the evolving nature of 21st century geopolitical rivalry as dramatically as Fakhrizadeh's death. Number 27. The civil rights leader, whose dream changed America forever. Martin Luther King Jr. had already transformed the American civil rights movement through peaceful protest, powerful speeches, and unwavering commitment to nonviolent resistance. By 1968, however, he faced growing criticism from opponents and even some former allies as he expanded his focus to economic inequality and opposition to the Vietnam War. While standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, King was fatally shot by James Earl Ray. News of his assassination spread across the nation within hours, triggering grief, outrage, and widespread unrest in dozens of American cities. Yet King's death also accelerated support for civil rights legislation and strengthened public recognition of his message. Today, his words continue to influence movements for justice around the world. Sometimes the most powerful voice becomes even louder after history attempts to silence it forever. Number 28. The Emperor Whose Murder Opened the Gates of Rome. Julius Caesar survived countless military campaigns, political conspiracies, and dangerous battles that would have ended almost anyone else's career. Ironically, the greatest threat came not from foreign enemies, but from trusted colleagues inside the Roman Senate. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, a group of senators convinced themselves that Caesar's growing power threatened the Roman Republic. As he entered the Senate meeting, the conspirators surrounded him under the pretense of presenting a petition before launching a coordinated attack with concealed daggers. Caesar suffered numerous stab wounds and died at the foot of a statue, honoring his former rival Pompey. Instead of restoring the Republic, the assassination plunged Rome into years of civil war. Those conflicts ultimately produced the Roman Empire under Augustus, proving the conspirators achieved almost the exact opposite of what they intended. Number 29. The journalist whose death exposed the power of organized crime. Daphne Caruana Galizia spent decades investigating corruption, money laundering, political scandals, and organized crime in Malta. Her reporting frequently targeted powerful individuals who preferred her stories never reach the public. Despite receiving repeated threats, lawsuits, and intimidation, she continued publishing investigations that attracted international attention. In 2017, only minutes after leaving her home, a powerful car bomb exploded, killing her instantly. The assassination shocked Europe and triggered widespread demands for justice, transparency, and stronger protections for investigative journalists. International investigations eventually uncovered connections leading to businessmen and criminal networks, exposing deep institutional failures within Malta. Her death became a defining symbol of the risks faced by journalists investigating corruption around the world. Sometimes the attempt to silence one reporter accomplishes the opposite, ensuring that unfinished investigations receive more global attention than ever before. Number 30. The inventor who was killed by his own creation. Franz Reichelt dreamed of giving humans the ability to fly safely through the air. In the early 20th century, before modern parachutes became reliable, he designed a wearable parachute suit that looked like a combination of clothing and a giant folded umbrella. The Austrian-born tailor was convinced his invention could save pilots forced to abandon damaged aircraft. After several unsuccessful tests using mannequins, Reichelt became determined to prove the design himself. In 1912, he received permission to demonstrate the suit from the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Standing high above the city, he confidently stepped forward, expecting the fabric wings to open. Instead, the device failed almost instantly, and he fell to his death. The tragedy shocked the public and became a reminder that confidence without enough testing can become a very dangerous experiment. His final demonstration became one of aviation history's strangest failures. Number 31. The explorer who disappeared. Searching for a lost city. Percy Fawcett became one of the most famous explorers of the early 20th century because of his obsession with discovering an ancient civilization hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest. A decorated British officer and experienced surveyor, Fawcett believed clues from old documents pointed toward a mysterious city he called Zé. In 1925, he entered the Brazilian jungle with his son Jack and his son's friend Raleigh Rimmel. They sent a final message describing their progress before disappearing completely. Search parties spent decades looking for evidence, creating one of exploration's greatest mysteries. Although many theories emerged, no confirmed explanation has ever been accepted. Fawcett's disappearance changed the way explorers approached dangerous expeditions, showing that courage and curiosity could also become a deadly combination. He went searching for a lost civilization and ended up becoming one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries himself. Number 32. The general who underestimated a winter Napoleon Bonaparte built one of history's most powerful armies, defeating opponents across Europe through brilliant strategy and aggressive campaigns. Yet his greatest disaster came not from an enemy general, but from the environment itself. In 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia with an enormous army of more than 500,000 soldiers, expecting a quick victory. Instead, Russian forces retreated strategically while destroying supplies along the route, forcing the French army deeper into unfamiliar territory. When winter arrived, the invasion became a nightmare of freezing temperatures, starvation, disease, and exhaustion. Thousands of soldiers died during the retreat from Moscow, destroying much of Napoleon's military strength. The defeat encouraged European powers to unite against him and eventually led to his downfall. One of history's greatest military minds had conquered armies across a continent, but he failed against something far simpler: a brutal winter and an opponent willing to wait. Number 33. The inventor who died, trying to prove his machine was safe. Thomas Midgley Jr. was one of the most influential and controversial inventors of the 20th century. His work helped create leaded gasoline and chlorofluorocarbons, chemicals that changed industry but later became associated with major environmental problems. Ironically, Midgley's own death came from another invention. After contracting polio, he developed a complicated system of ropes and pulleys designed to help him move around his home. The device was meant to restore independence despite his physical limitations. In 1944, the mechanism malfunctioned, and the ropes became tangled around him, causing fatal injuries. His death was a strange ending for a man whose career was defined by solving technical problems. Midgley created machines and chemicals designed to make life easier, but his own mechanical solution became the final danger he could not overcome. History remembers him as both a brilliant inventor and a warning about unintended consequences. Which death was history's dumbest disaster? Tell us your pick in the comments.